one of my greatest teachers has been my disability. My disability has taken me to lots of dark places, but it's also helped me learn how to navigate those dark places.
Mhm.
And I feel like that is a skill, right? Like it's a skill to understand and be able to navigate dark parts of our lives.
Content warnings for this episode include religion, medical trauma, catheter and needle use, ableism, and being misgendered.
Genderful would like to acknowledge the Indigenous peoples and unceded lands that the producers, hosts, and guests lived and have dwelt upon. Today we honor the
Coast Salish,
Mohawk, Algonquin, and Anishinabewaki,
Plains Cree, Blackfoot, Saulteaux, Nakota Sioux, Métis, and Inuit, and quite a few others in this gathering place.
We honor the elders, the human, plant, and animal ancestors of these lands, and celebrate the living descendants of these peoples. May all beings tend these lands for the goodness of the next 7 generations and beyond.
Howdy, folks. Welcome to Genderful, a talk show interviewing gender diverse people about their special interests. Hi, I'm GenderMeowster, and my pronouns are they, them.
Hi, I'm Miranda, and my pronouns are she, her.
The focus of our show is to interview trans, non-binary, agender, two-spirit, and gender diverse people regarding their special interests, passion projects, and resources for the gender diverse community.
We want our audience to know that we hold multiple diverse identities and bring these lenses to the show with our passion for telling our stories.
I identify as non-binary, trans-masculine, polyamorous, ADHD, autistic, and disabled with chronic pain and mobility issues. I also am white and reside in the United States.
I identify as trans feminine, neurodivergent, queer, and a person of color residing in Canada. We invite you to remember that we are whole people with robust lives, friendships, challenges, and successes. We love and are loved, and we are delighted to share these stories with you.
As always, we kindly remind our listeners that no person is a monolith of their identities. Your identities can change over time and are valid every step of the way. And if you think you're gender diverse, you are gender diverse. There's no social or medical prerequisite to be included in the community.
Welcome to Genderful Podcast, a show interviewing gender diverse people about their special interests. This week, our guest, Ilara, they, them, is chatting with us about magic, ministry, and disability. Juice happened to see a YouTube video of them hosting a Unitarian Universalist service for Pride Month and decided to invite them for Genderful. Welcome to Genderful, Ilara. Hope you're having a
Thank
good
you so
time
much.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm really excited to be here.
Well, and what's fun is the live recording of this is the day before Samhain.
That's ridiculously epic. It makes me really happy. Actually, Samhain is like one of my favorite holidays.
Yeah. Now, as someone who knows nothing about this stuff, can you maybe explain what that is?
Sure. So Samhain is a point on the pagan wheel of the year. There are 8 points on the pagan wheel of the year, and it is the roots of Halloween. It's the time of the year when the veil is the thinnest between the living and the dead. So there's ritual involved, and a lot of the traditions that we see with Halloween have roots in Samhain.
And so in the Northern Hemisphere, it's Samhain, and in the Southern Hemisphere, it's Beltane. So in the Northern Hemisphere, it's the death ritual. It's honoring our beloved dead. And in the Southern Hemisphere, it's the fertility and life ritual, which is about, making babies exist, etc. So the circle of life and death is honored in the pagan wheel of the year, which is fun.
Yep, exactly.
That's cool. I did not know that. Actually, despite Halloween being one of the few holidays I do like, I actually don't really know that much about the history of it. And it's a very, I feel like it's a very North American phenomenon, because as far as I know, it's not really that. I mean, up until the last couple decades, it hasn't really been a thing in say Europe or Asia or other parts of the world.
Mm-hmm.
And kind of other cultures have their own kind of adjacent holidays. So I know in Mexico they have La Dia de la Muerte, which is very Halloween adjacent in my opinion. Maybe someone who is of that cultural heritage may like to differ on that, but I think the costumes are wonderful. So
it's very fun. Ilara, what are some things that you can trace back to your youth that indicated you might be gender diverse one day?
Oh my goodness, there are so many. So I actually started using the word gender fluid when I was about maybe like 15 or 16. I was really lucky because I went to a public art school here in Nêhiyaw-Askiy, colonially known as Edmonton. And so we were within the city, not respectfully known as the gay school here. And but I was grateful for that, and it was true in a very good way because there was a lot more room to explore gender and orientation than there often was in other schools that I had friends who went to. Um, so yeah, so I started using the term gender fluid in like late junior high, early high school because it was the only word that wasn't male or female that I knew at the time. And I would say like early childhood indicators were probably more expression based. I really found feminine defined clothing uncomfortable even as an early child, and like Halloween I would dress up as like superheroes. And I remember one Halloween, one of my favorite Halloween costumes, my dad made me a epic Batman belt for a homemade Batman costume.
Awesome.
Yeah, so really it was a lot. I think the early indicators were primarily in expression and interests as well. I very rarely found common ground in interests with my female friends. Uh Loved dinosaurs, loved superheroes. And my
I mean,
parents were both artists, so they were open at the time. And I know like these things aren't gendered, but my parents thought they were gendered, right?
of course, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
I feel like liking superheroes and dinosaurs is a very normal and wholesome thing for any child to do.
I completely,
Yeah.
completely agree.
I did
Yeah.
want to circle back. So you said you went to the quote unquote gay high school. So um, we were talking in the pre-show. I'm also from Edmonton. Like
Oh yeah.
that's where we're growing up. So I actually don't remember what the gay high school was, but a high school I did go to, our mascot was a lion named Gaylord,
Oh
and we
my
loved him.
goodness. That's amazing. I went to Victoria School for the performing and visual arts. The
Hmm.
fact that it was the art school is kind of what gave it that
Yeah, of
derogatory
course.
within the rest of the city, right? Because of course you can't love the arts if you're not like
Well, it's just
cisgendered
something
people
that's
don't like the arts, clearly.
for whatever reason, people who are gender diverse or sexually diverse, they kind of gravitate towards the arts. That's not the path that I took. I very much kind of went into the sciences, and I didn't really discover that I was queer until much later in life. But I think if stuff like drama was like more accepted, if it wasn't seen as like quote unquote gay or effeminate or whatever, I think I would have taken an interest in it because like I very much developed an interest in the arts later in life. And I think my life would have taken a very different turn had I actually signed up for drama school in a drama class in high school. So
Yeah.
but speaking of how things can take different turns, we all know that like your relationship to gender it's not a linear path. It's,
No,
you're not going from point A to point B to point C. So how would you
no.
say that your relationship to gender has evolved over time?
I would say so. One huge turning point for me was in, say, like maybe 6 or 7 years ago, and I was doing youth work with the Unitarian church that I was Unitarian Universalist church that I was working with at the time, and I was basically researching alternative gender terms so that I could be supportive of the youth coming into our
Mhm.
program. And I had never heard the term non binary before. And as a young adult, like as soon as I read about it, was like, oh my goodness, like this is like it just clicked so quickly. Um, and it took me a while to start using they them pronouns because social pressure and being in a mostly elderly congregation made things challenging. But then I realized that it was the only socially responsible thing to do was to use the pronouns that actually matched who I was. Um,
Mhm.
and prior to that, I would say that my relationship with gender, I was interested in Jungian psychology from a very early age, and a big piece of Jungian psychology is like working on balancing the masculine and the feminine side of ourselves. So, like, even though it's a very, I would say it is a very gendered form of psychological analysis, the work that I did within it kind of like paved the path to understanding my like more balanced version of who I am as a non-binary person. Um, so that's interesting. I find that interesting. Yeah. Uh, and I think now a big piece of my gender journey is really like I get misgendered as female most of the time because I was born in a female sexed body and don't have any desire to change my physical body. My gender is very much an internal piece for me. And so I get misgendered as female a lot, which has created an interesting relationship with that internal feminine aspect of myself because I find myself like gravitating towards more masculine expression, not because I don't honor my feminine, but because I don't get misgendered as masculine, if that makes
Yeah.
any sense.
No, it
So,
does make
like,
sense. I mean,
yeah,
like,
so it creates a weird dynamic
mhm.
internally sometimes.
Yeah, because part of gender is performative.
Totally.
So like we're all performing roles. We're all um there's an aspect of gender it's not how necessarily how you see yourself, but it's how you want to be seen by others,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
So I mean, I can totally understand where you're coming from there, where you just like you're not wanting to be gendered as something that's you're not, even though like it's not really like coming from like your internal sense of expression, but just like, hey,
Hmm.
like I want people to see me the way I see myself. So that involves, having
Exactly.
to play that expression game a little bit.
Yeah, exactly.
Hmm.
But yeah, I have found it interesting because I've definitely found like almost needing to compensate internally with my feminine self because if I don't express more masculine, I get misgendered all the time. So
Yeah,
it's really
absolutely. I
it's
mean,
a
and this
very
is
interesting dynamic to work
yeah, and like
with.
I can kind of speak to that, like to my own experience as a trans
Hmm.
femme, is like a lot of people who are trans femme, like kind of like over feminize early on in their transition. They go like really,
Totally.
really hyper femme in their presentation because I mean they want to be perceived as women, right?
Yeah,
So
exactly.
that makes absolute perfect sense.
Yeah,
But for anyone listening, you don't have to do these things. This is just like
definitely
if
not.
you're comfortable in the clothes that you're wearing, it, that's all that matters. So you
Yeah,
are
no.
absolutely valid regardless of how you present yourself.
100%. This is like 100% just my own personal experience,
Of
right?
course, yeah.
Like everybody's experience is going to be different and they're all valid.
Well, I hear what you're saying, and I have friends who are trans men who did the same sort of hyper masculinized in the beginning.
Yeah,
And now I have friends who are, 5, 10 or more years on HRT and full beards. And now they're like, oh yeah, I'm experimenting with wearing skirts and dresses again.
totally.
Like with my beard, with my, top surgery is all healed up, like, you know, and it's just really fun to watch those beloveds. Like sometimes some of their trajectories have been like going towards trans man he him. And then
Mm.
now they're like, 5, 10 years into their medical, like chemical transition. They're like, oh, I'm gonna be a he, they, or a they, them, or like their physical form has
Mhm.
very much changed, but now they're sort of leaning back towards some other direction that's, um, you know, a they, them, who, if they were getting misgendered, would be he, him, even though at birth they were a she, her. right?
Yeah.
And so then it's like this ping pong thing. Yeah,
Totally.
there's so many steps that could be taken along this journey, and it doesn't necessarily mean those people are detransitioning either. It's just like
No,
it's the
No, of
next
course not.
evolution of their gender presentation and gender identity and exploration. Like,
Yeah, and it sounds like
Yeah.
cliche. Like we all use this word, oh, like they're on a journey. It's I mean, I've heard the word journey so many times now that I'm just like, ugh. But
Right.
that's literally what it is. And you know, it's I mean, to add another cliche, it's not about the destination, it's about the journey. So like you may
Totally.
get on your journey and think it's like, oh, it's like I started as a he, him, and I'm gonna be a she, her. But you know, along the way you might be a she, they, or you might be, you know,
Yeah.
it's, or there
Or
may be all sorts of different
all the
pronouns.
neo pronouns.
Yeah, exactly.
Some of the
There's
people.
there's a trans comedian that I've seen before, and they have a bit about like it's like, oh, it's like I'm a she her now, but I might actually be non-binary, but I'm just like literally just too lazy to come out again, so I don't want to change it.
Right? Yeah, I have some people who I admire very much who are parents, and like literally they ask their children daily what their pronouns are, which
Hmm.
I think is so admirable, because they're like, if you're in an environment where you're allowed to explore your gender, like it is fluid. It's like any other part of our lives. It's a
Of
fluid piece.
course,
Like
yeah.
identity is something that is, and like this is like confirmed, like identity is a fluid thing. It's moving as we move through life.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
I respect my friends who do that like so much, because their kids
Yeah,
are
no,
so
that's
self-aware, right?
of course, yeah, no, that's awesome.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, I also thought it was like when we were talking about like, you know, bouncing back and forth between clothes. So I purged most of my wardrobe, but not all of it. And I still have some men's polo shirts that I kept
Nice.
because I think they're cute.
Hmm.
And I wore one to the office the other day. I'm just like, I don't care. This is a men's shirt. I'm going to wear it to the office because it's got toucans on it, and I think it's cute. So and it's just
Exactly.
like I'm at the point of my transition now where it's like I feel fine wearing, you know, men's clothes sometimes. You know, it's like I'm not gonna get misgendered. Like I'm still presenting very feminine. But you know, I can wear a men's shirt and it doesn't have to like completely destroy my self-identity anymore. So
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's healthy, right? Like we all
mhm.
like, and I think that was like one piece that I still hold from all of the Jungian analysis that I did early in my 20s, is like we do all have both aspects of ourselves, like whichever one is the strongest and coming out like can be how we identify, but that doesn't mean that there's like zero feminine me if I'm
Mhm.
expressing as masculine one day, right? Like it's just not what's coming forward.
Mhm.
Yeah.
so let me switch topics towards the special topic we picked for today.
Woohoo!
We can keep, you know, peppering in the gender thoughts as we go.
Always.
Mm, So we're talking about magic, ministry, and disability today. And I'm wondering, Alara, if you would share a bit about how you experience magic.
I experience magic in many, many ways. I'm gonna go to the definition that feels the truest for me first. So about a year or so ago, I don't know, my sense of time is absolutely ridiculous, but not
Oh.
long ago, I did a workshop on ritual with Starhawk, who is like the American witch. Like actually the American witch. Like she's been writing about witchcraft and politics like since the 60s. And she is adorable, and I love her.
She
Anyways,
co-founded.
she's also now on Instagram, which makes me so happy. Anyways. Um so I did a workshop with her, and her definition of magic is one that resonates really strongly with me, and that is simply any any act or intention meant to shift consciousness. And that can be consciousness of our own consciousness, or consciousness of people around us, or like the greater collective consciousness, right? Like consciousness is kind of like, I mean, we are studying consciousness. We don't have a definition of consciousness, a working definition of consciousness, but magic is that which shifts our ideas and our ways of thinking. So that's like a definition that resonates with me, and that's like the working definition that she was using within her ritual course, because she was saying like anything you do, if you have intention behind it, can be a ritual. Like you can the example that she gave was you can brush your teeth unconsciously, but if you brush your teeth every day and think, okay, I'm like clearing out like negative speech every time you brush your teeth, it's like it makes it a ritual, and if you do it all the time, it eventually shifts your consciousness because you're being intentional about that action. And when there's a physical action connected to that intention, it helps solidify it and ground it.
Yeah.
So
Star is
yeah.
sort of dipping into the Buddhist practice of gathas there then. Just turning this daily mundane daily things into a sacred like mindfulness practice.
Yeah, exactly.
Love that.
Yeah. There's definitely connection. And so I experienced, so that being the definition, I experience magic in a lot of ways because I'm very intentional about how I am in the world. I feel like one of my greatest like purposes is to expand my consciousness and learn as much as humanly possible within one lifetime. And so I definitely like I experience magic through learning. I experience magic through creating. I'm an artist, and art is a huge expression of my magic in the world, and a lot through ritual. I do a lot of ritual in different modalities of ritual. I've done quite a bit of like working with the Celtic Wheel of the Year. I myself have a Ukrainian heritage as my background, and so I've been learning in the last few years about Slavic witchcraft, which has blown my mind open because it's so rooted in my heritage, and I didn't know it was a thing, and I didn't understand how I didn't know it was a thing. So yeah, so there's so many ways that I experience magic, and I also feel like a big piece of it is about connection as well. So like within Unitarian Universalism, we have 8 principles, and one of them is respecting the interdependent web of life, and that like web of life to me is also a big piece of where the magic is. And just like recognizing the connections between all things. Yeah.
Well, this next question I find really interesting because it's about dreams, and I love telling people about my dreams to anyone who will listen. There's not very many people who like are interested in listening to other people's dreams, but some people are, and I really like to share my dreams with other people. But how would you say that dreaming has shaped you?
So I was looking at the list and intentionally not talking about dreaming so I could focus it on this question. So, oh my goodness. Dreaming, wow. Especially within the last couple of years. So I've been connecting deeply with, I think I mentioned it, it's actually where I'm going right after this interview. I have a moon lodge that I go to that's led by a Cree knowledge keeper, and it's a group of dreamers, which I've always been a big dreamer. Like I had some really major dreams as a child that have like shaped a lot of my experience. One of them was an angel visiting me and passing me a note that I dropped behind the bed, and for like most of my life I've been like, what was on that note, and like
Aw.
looking for it. The interesting thing about that one, so I was like 4 when I had that dream, and for like 2 or 3 days after, I was like trying to get in behind the bed, and I found a screwdriver and like tried to unscrew the vent because I was like absolutely certain that the note had fallen into the vent because I couldn't find it behind the bed. And my mom very understandably got mad and was like, it was just a dream. Like, there's no note in the vent system. And so that, like, I feel like that shut down a lot of, and again, this, like, understandable, right? But I feel like that shut down a lot of my understanding of how real dreaming is. And within the last few years of, like, working more deeply with elders and knowledge keepers, I've been coming to understand the reality of my dreaming experiences. And that's, like, blown things so wide open for me in the last few years.
Mhm.
And it's like a huge, huge way that I experience magic is through dreaming.
Mhm.
Um, like, very obvious and tangible synchronistic ways. Like, it's mind-boggling, honestly. I'm still kind of like, oh, okay, this has opened up in the last couple of years. Cool. Where do I go from here?
Oh, and
Yeah.
what an accessible form of magic.
Right? Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Most people
And like
take
even
some
coming at
people.
it from a scientific perspective, I mean, dreams are very like well studied, and they're
Mhm.
they're they're very significant. I mean, they're very very important, like in the fields of like psychology, neuropsychology, and that sort of thing. So like it's not like purely like a magic thing. This is all regardless of like your feelings on magic or your feelings on science or anything like that. Like
Mhm.
I think we can all agree that like dreams can be very important.
Yeah, I
Um,
totally agree. And I actually recently read an article on, there's an online magazine called Psyche, which is
mhm.
fabulous. And I, pardon me, was reading an article on how in Western society we become a very waking centric world.
Mm.
And so I really feel like what you just said is important, because I feel like gonna like be my anti-capitalist self for a moment
Oh,
here,
go
but
for it.
great, fabulous. There was no content warning on anti-capitalism. I don't know if we need one.
You're in the right crowd for that. So
Great, fabulous. So capitalism encourages us to burn out, basically. Like,
Mhm.
who needs sleep? You can sleep when you're dead, kind of
Yeah.
messaging, right? But like, literally, our psychic and mental health is directly connected to dreaming. Like, like even from a scientific standpoint. And the interesting thing I found about that article was it was talking about how rarely sleep science incorporates dreaming, which is like literally the bridge between being in waking and like deep REM sleep. It's called
Mhm.
hypnagogic sleep, and it's like the bridge between the waking and the sleeping. So if you're not dreaming, you're not actually getting deep enough sleep to be rested and well. Like,
Mhm.
yeah. So it's so interesting to me. Yeah, it's definitely, and it's a very, like, it's a, it's not even just a human experience. Like, there's studies now about how animals dream
Oh
as well.
yeah. I mean, anyone who
So
owns a dog could probably
exactly.
knows when their dog is dreaming.
Right? Yeah,
Yeah.
precisely. For a long time, there was
Mhm.
like inaccurate science that said animals are,
Sure.
or humans are the only animals that dream. It's one of the things that like defines us as humans, but
Mm.
that's
Yeah.
been very disproven.
Yeah, I'm always kind of skeptical of anything that like tries to separate humans from other animals. It's like, well,
Right?
I mean, like,
Yes.
yes, like we can build iPhones and stuff like that. Animals can't really do that, but like, there's not that much that separates us from other animals. So,
No.
but yeah, no, I'm like, and as I was saying before, like I'm very much coming at this from a perspective of like a scientist. Like I'm very much like embedded in the natural world. Like I'm not a spiritual person in any way, and I'm still like, yeah, dreams are really important.
Yeah.
And just speaking of my personal experience, like I've had dreams that have like, for better or worse, have completely changed my life. I mean,
Exactly.
I once, like, the worst depressive episode I've ever had was because of a dream.
Yeah.
Um,
That's real.
so yeah. Now, for those of you who are listening in the future that are not watching, our guest actually has a shirt on that says "Dream Big" on it.
And the
Can you maybe tell us
bottoms,
a little bit more about that?
sure. So I have a shirt on. There's more on the bottom. It says "Dream big, then let your heart lead the way." And it's a picture of a palm with like the moon cycles and an eye in the center. It's from one
Hmm.
of my favorite clothing companies. I am not sponsored, but it's called Wholesome Culture, and it is I think it's entirely online, and they donate proceeds to animal well-being and use sustainable fabrics, and
Awesome.
very frequently have sales that make things super affordable.
Awesome. Yeah,
Yeah,
no, we can, I'm sure we can put that in the show notes.
do
Yeah.
it. Wholesome
Yes.
Culture.
I'm grabbing it right now.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Um,
I'm always on the lookout for like cool shirts, especially shirts that I can purchase in Canada that don't cost me like $100 to ship here.
Right? Yeah, real. Okay, so one more thing. I'm actually super curious. So, one of my major experiences within the last couple of years with working with other dreamers is the phenomenon of collective dreaming, which has like completely blown my mind. And I'm
Mm.
super curious about how that could be explained scientifically, if you have thoughts. So, when I say collective dreaming, I mean like this is like a bit of a mundane example, but I don't really
Mhm.
want to go into the more mystical ones because they feel a little bit personal. But like I dreamt that uh one of my friends texted me about needing birthday cake, and I was like in this place where there were big trains that you could ride around, and I texted her the next morning and I was like, "Ah, I just dreamt about you making a cake." And I didn't tell her the train part. I just said that. And she was like,
Mm.
"Oh yeah, yeah, it's like today's one of my kids' birthday and we're like going to this play place with all of these like big train sets cuz Ari loves trains." I was like,
Yeah.
"Oh, okay, cool." So like that has happened more and more frequently and in deeper and deeper
Mhm.
ways since I've been working with my dreamer. So I'm really curious if there's like a materialist way of seeing that.
Yeah. So as someone that's very much not my field. I mean, my field is, mathematics, economics, and statistics. So,
Fair.
but
Okay.
I can speculate.
Do
So like
it.
my
Do it.
speculation is, I mean, that's just human pattern recognition. I mean, we are, if we're nothing else, we are machines that recognize patterns.
Okay.
So that's a very useful tool for our survival. But it can lead to situations like pareidolia, where you see patterns where there
Right.
are none, or they could just be happy coincidences. But I mean, I don't want to discount the possibility that you may have said something that you were unaware of that like subconsciously affected. So this is something that like I love conspiracies. We talked about flat Earth a little bit in the green room, and another conspiracy I love to kind of do deep dives on is like the whole alien conspiracy, and like
Love it.
it's interesting how like when people like have these alien abduction stories, they all kind of like have the same alien that it's like your X-Files, like the little man with the big eyes, and they all basically look the same. So it's like, oh, some people might say it's like, oh, well, that must mean it's real. That must mean that like they're all being abducted by these aliens. But the actual scientific explanation is like people started sharing that story, and then that subconsciously kind of fed into other people's like imagination. So it's just like it kind of like one person had the story, and then they told other people, then it blew up in the media, and then everyone's just like they have these like they pass out, or whatever situation might be, but because they have this like pop culture idea of what an alien looks like, that's what their brain imagines.
Right.
So I could go on a rant on that for a long time, but we should probably move to our next question.
Fair. Fair.
what an enriching conversation. So, Laura, what and who have been some of your greatest teachers?
Oh, there's so many. So I literally just finished like 3 days ago my application for grad school. And one of the big pieces that I talked about, because it's a really extensive, thank you, a very extensive application, including like letters of your goals, like professional and personal goals, And one of the things that I talked about the most within that context was how I don't feel like I feel like goals are mutable. They change all the time. But I don't feel like I'm here purely because I put me here. Like, I'm here because I've had so many teachers who have helped me get to this point in my life. And there's lots of humans who are those teachers. My yoga instructor, the minister I worked with for a long time, a number of the elders in my life. Like, I have lots of human teachers, but then I believe my intention with this question was also that one of my greatest teachers has been my disability. Um,
Mm.
so I was born with chronic kidney failure, and it's been like such a huge journey. And it's kind of like what you said, like a dream created this like big depression. Like, my disability has taken me to lots of dark places, but it's also helped me learn how to navigate those dark places.
Mm.
And I feel like that is a skill, right? Like, it's a skill to understand and be able to navigate dark parts of our lives. We all have dark parts of our lives. But
Absolutely.
yeah, but like having to touch those spaces so early in life, I feel like has been a blessing in a lot of ways. And definitely I would say that op- um like that experience of having a disability has been one of the things that has brought me to where I am now. Which I feel like I'm in a lot of places now and in this moment, but
Yeah.
like specifically on in the place where I am pursuing grad school and looking towards doing ministry and like doing all of the things in the world that I feel like I'm called to be doing. Um but yeah, so those teachers are, I feel like it's really important, and this is definitely like one of the main teachings in a lot of indigenous communities. Like, humility is so important. Like, we wouldn't
Oh,
be
definitely.
where we are without those that came before us and those that have taught us all that we know, right? Like, we're not islands. It's exactly what you were just talking about. Like, we even unconsciously pick up information. So,
Hmm.
right? Like, there's teachers around us always.
Yeah, 100%.
Um, so we wanted to ask Laura a bit about what have you learned from your disability? You mentioned a minute ago that one of your great teachers has been disability, and I wonder if you wanted to spend a little more time just talking about that with us.
Sure. So I feel like I mentioned the skill of being able to navigate difficult times. So that's a really big piece. Um but I also feel like, having not had any other experience in life beyond my chronic illness, like I've always had this chronic illness. Um I feel like one of the greatest lessons that I have learned from it is the gratitude of each moment, because there are so many difficult moments that when the moments are easeful or joyful or like genuinely heartfelt or connecting or magical moments,
Mhm.
um I have so much gratitude for them because I have so much experience with having to navigate darkness.
Mm.
So those moments of, and I mean, I also have a lot of experience of ridiculous amounts of blessing as well. But I also feel like I can see things as blessings that maybe are not as accessible as being considered blessings to people who haven't had to navigate darkness as much.
Yeah.
Um, so that's been really, I feel like that's been my greatest lesson. And then the other one is simply ridiculous levels of perseverance and gumption. Like, just like over the top determination levels has also been a very big lesson. It's like knowing that, okay, I'm navigating a dark time, but that's not a landing place. It's just something to navigate.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's still a lesson I'm struggling to learn because yeah, it can be tough sometimes. Like when when life deals you a bunch of L's, it's hard to take the W's sometimes, and it's as
yeah.
yeah. Sorry,
Like L's and
I have so much
W's.
internet brain rot that it affects how I talk now.
Amazing.
But yeah, no,
Just
it's
wrong.
and that's been kind of part of my therapy is like just accepting the good times, and and yeah, and you're right, like when you deal with so much darkness and you deal with so much adversity, it really teaches you to kind of how to persevere and how to kind of get through those times. And I think that's kind of what a lot of folks that don't struggle with disability or don't deal with like chronic illness or even just mental illness, they don't kind of appreciate.
Totally.
Yeah. So I had another point I wanted to bring up, and now
Sure.
I can't remember what it was.
No. It's all good.
But we'll come back to it. Like I don't know, my brain sometimes like just thinks of things in orders that don't make sense. So we will come back to it. But we did have another question. So just circling back to something we were talking about earlier. Why do you feel you were called to a path of ministry?
I feel like it's a lot about what I was just talking about, like that ability to understand. And I think this is a song title, but it's apt. I think it's by Sarah McLachlan. Anyways, I understand the beauty of ordinary miracles.
Mm,
And I feel like that is something that can be very helpful in people's lives, is the awareness of ordinary miracles. And I also really feel called to it because, and I to be clear, I very specifically feel called towards a Unitarian Universalist ministry, and Unitarian Universalism is a very multi-faith community. And so a big piece of that calling for me is about, pardon me, interfaith work and building bridges between people. I think there's like way more divisiveness than we need in this world. And so for me, a path of ministry is really about a path of creating connections with and for people and helping build intimate community circles to, I don't want to use the word combat, but like to remedy a lot of the isolation and loneliness that
mhm.
exists in this society, especially post pandemic.
Oh, absolutely.
Right? Like we've gone through a lot of collective trauma, and I feel like there's a big hole, but it's a space to be filled with something. And I feel like bringing people together and building bridges is a big piece of that calling.
Yeah. Alara, I don't know how much of my background you know about, but I actually um, I went to one of the most like liberal leftist seminaries I could find
Mm-hmm.
across the street from Stark King School for the Ministry, which is the UU, one of the UU seminaries. So I have friends who were in that school doing that work while I was in my program, which was a multi-denominational Christian program. I then converted to paganism halfway through my program.
Love it. Love it.
Instead of getting a master's in divinity, I swapped it to a master's in theological studies, so I didn't have to do a midler or my third year of school. And now I have a master's degree that I'm totally not using because really hard to figure out how to make a living as like some sort of pagan chaplain person. Because I wanted to do chaplaincy. I didn't want to do, every Sunday get up at a thing and talk to people situation. And so wanted to do chaplaincy. And so like I feel like I have found some of the ways to bring some of those like values or the pieces that felt important to me, especially about building community and like creating places that are meaningful to people through the work that we do on Twitch and on Discord. And, not that we're a cult at all, if we're not, but just a community space where people can share resources and build friendships and, navigate life together. And there's something that's so powerfully disability forward about having it be an online community, because
Totally.
you don't have to get out of bed and go to the thing. You can do it from your house. And so that's assuming you have the technology to access it and you have an internet connection, which I know not everyone does.
Yeah.
So I will acknowledge those limitations right there.
Yeah.
But there's something really that has felt very meaningful to me to be doing those pieces. And so
Yeah.
that's my ministry, if you will.
That's really cool. No, totally. And I've been kind of wrestling with that in the last couple of years, because I did children's and youth ministry within the church for like a decade, and then in going
Universalist Church.
within the Unitarian Universalist Church, one of the congregations here. And then when I resigned to go back to school, I was like, what am I doing with my ministry? I'm a student now, but where's my I felt like I had to leave ministry to become a minister, is what I felt like. And I feel like I've worked with that quite a bit, and just understanding that my life is a ministry, right? Being interviewed for a podcast in a way that might lighten up somebody's day, even 1%, is a piece of my ministry. The art that I do is my ministry. And so just coming to terms with that. But yeah, I think there's so many ways of doing and being a minister in the world. And yeah, I'm actually getting my MTS with a specialization in spiritual care to do chaplaincy. I'm hoping to do hospital chaplaincy. Yeah, specifically.
Actually officiated a wedding yesterday.
Nice. I did one a couple of weeks ago. I love officiating weddings.
It's so fun.
It is.
My favorite part was doing a grounding meditation. My eyes were closed the whole time, but I got to see the raw video of the event yesterday. And there's actually more people that participated than I thought did.
Aww.
The sort of the parents and the whoever that are like, I don't know about this pagan stuff. I'll put a hand that direction. We're all doing it. So I'll join in.
I love it. That's amazing.
I love that ministry the definition of ministry can be more expensive. Supporting people in community and making meaning of their lives.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And I feel like that is a very the definition of ministry within Unitarian Universalism is super broad, right? So I think that's one of the things that's helped me come to terms with not being on the ground for a few years.
Yeah. Who inspires you?
Oh my goodness. So many people. While we were on break, I just got a reference letter for grad school from one of the people who inspires me a lot, who is the minister who I worked with for 10 years, Reverend Ann Barker. It's a shout out. There's so many people, though, who inspires me. The elders in my life, the children who I've worked with. I'm so inspired by children, and my friends who are parents, and seeing how much, honestly, how much trauma that our generation has worked with in order to parent well. Wow. That is so inspiring to me to see healthy parenting happening. I just feel like it's an endless list. Adrienne Maree Brown, author of Emergent Strategy and editor and co-author of Holding Change, inspires me hugely. The work that she's brought forward into the world with Emergent Strategy is so beautiful and so necessary. It's basically emergent facilitation. within like Lessons from Nature, like beautiful book. If you haven't read it, super recommend. That would be another one for the show notes. Emergent Strategy by Adrienne Marie Brown. Yeah, I honestly feel like it's an endless list because everybody I come into contact with inspires me a little bit because we all are always learning from each other and building these new connections. Like this podcast inspires me, doing this work inspires me. Like honestly, right? Like it's bringing a community into the world in a world where there's so much like divisive media and in the middle of so many wars going on. Like community building is probably one of the most inspiring things there is. Like, yeah, I think that honestly kind of covers it.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
it's not a short list to be sure, but that's a good thing.
Yeah. I don't
Um,
remember what I had in mind with that question. It was a while ago now, but I'm glad Anne got a
no.
shout out.
Now, in addition to building community, how do you participate in building justice and shifting systems?
So I'm gonna go back to emergent strategy. So emergent strategy has different principles. The book Emergent Strategy, Adrienne Marie Brown, making sure that's a real clear reference. But one of the pieces that really matters to me from that is the principle of small is all. And that's the idea, and it's combined. There's a couple. So there's small is all, and then there's mile deep, inch wide. So rather than trying to go for as many numbers as possible, like going into depth within the relationships that are there and like using that as an organizing principle, I think is really important because again, capitalism, all of the numbers, like the number of followers is the thing that matters the most. That is how you get paid, which is understandable. We need money in this world. But like really what matters is building the community and having those deeper relationships coming forward. It's not about like the number of people in a circle, it's about how strong that circle is.
Yeah, it's quality over quantity.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So I feel like going deep into the relationships that I'm in is actually one of the ways that I participate in building justice and shifting systems the most because it's antithetical to capitalism. Actually though. And then there's like very many on the ground ways that I also participate in building justice and shifting systems. I volunteer with the City of Edmonton Disability Advisory Council. I do a couple of different small group ministry facilitations through our church. I've worked with youth. I've done guerrilla art is another way that I like to build justice, just like simple things. Like one year I organized it so that our youth made fleece scarves and wrote love notes and then like tied them along the bridge leading up to the youth emergency shelter here in Edmonton. So like projects like that. So the whole bridge was full of scarves and notes. But I just feel like there's so many crucial ways of shifting systems that happen on a smaller scale. And like I feel like resisting oppressive systems doesn't always have to be a big act. Like I feel like little acts matter when it comes to resisting oppression.
Oh,
Like
absolutely.
right? Like so I do lots of these like in the world ways of servicing in order to build justice, but I really feel like the things that matter the most are like even the inner dialogue shifting and like treating each other with kindness and compassion and care. Like those are the things that shift systems the most, I think, is when
Yeah,
we
absolutely. And
see
like
each other.
That's something that I very much resonate with. It's, I mean, we all fight in our own way, and we all have different ways and different capacities to fight our oppressive systems. I
Yeah,
remember having a conversation with a disabled person that I follow, and they felt bad that they couldn't participate in the most recent protests because of their
mm,
disability. And I was reassuring them, it's like, hey, we all fight in our own ways, and they're all valid.
exactly.
So even though you can't be out there, boots in the ground, like, yelling
Yeah,
at the transphobes, it's just living your life and being happy. That is a way of
it
fighting back.
is. Yeah, absolutely.
Mhm.
Yeah. There's an Instagram page that I follow called the Nap Ministry, and it's this like incredible black feminist minister who's like, rest is revolutionary. Like, and again, it's like back to that dreaming, like capitalism wants us to burn out. So if we're taking care of
Mhm.
ourselves and loving each other, like that is a resistance.
Mhm. Now, is there anything that we missed about magic, ministry, disability that you'd like to make sure you say?
I don't actually know if there is. I feel like I feel like we covered a lot of ground. Um I guess maybe I would say that I missed saying that part of my ministry is helping us remember that magic is in the world. That's like a piece of the ministry going forward. Um just in terms of that ability to shift consciousness and that ability to make connection and yeah, and that ability to love each other and ourselves. I feel like all of that is magic, and I feel like
Mhm.
it's easy to forget.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So we have one question this is actually my favorite question that we ask our guests because just in the current climates, a lot of our experiences are kind of framed in in tragedy or negativity, but I think it's far more important that we share our joy. So can you share an experience with us that you've had with gender euphoria?
Wearing a pink bow tie.
I love it.
Yep, that is definitely up there. And also this ridiculously beautiful pair of shoes that I bought that were a gift from my mom recently that are like super classy masculine, but with like floral and pink material. Great. Love it so much. Super
Mm, it's
euphoric.
got a lot of gender energy. I love it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Is there anything you'd like to make sure that folks know about your perspective on gender and non-binary, trans, and or gender diverse issues?
Really feel like the most important piece is to recognize that it's fluid and that our identities are fluid pieces of who we are. Like life is constantly changing and evolving, and so we are also constantly changing and evolving. And I feel like that fluidity is just crucial. It's like a crucial piece of awareness to understand that beings are not stagnant things that don't change over time. Like we all change over time. It's just
Mhm.
the way of things. Yeah.
All right. All right. So normally this is where we chime in with normally this is where we chime in with questions from our chat, but because we're not streaming live right now, we don't have
Right.
any chat questions. So we'll
That's too bad.
all right. So, Ilara Stefaniuk-Gaudet is a non binary disabled artist with big dreams. They are working, loving, creating, learning, and creating to make their corner of the world a better place. You can find them at patreon.com/Ilara11 and also Ilara33 on Instagram. Here is this week's Clatter Query that you, our audience, can answer on our social media platforms.
What is your most magical moment?
I love that. Everyone, next Monday, November 6th, is Job Action Day. So we are having a very special Genderful episode featuring a panel discussion of various trans folks employed at large companies. I've noticed that so many of us gender slender beings tend to have lots of artsy jobs that don't pay a lot. Like almost all of my trans friends are in that category. And so I was like, okay. But like some of us have figured out how to have good jobs with like decent income and like great health benefits, because at least in the United States where I live, we don't have universal health care, and it's real hard to get your gender affirming care medically. So we want to spend some time kind of looking at and discussing with some like gender diverse people who've kind of figured that out. How did they get there? So if there's anyone in our community who's like, I want that too, then they can learn a bit more about how to get from where we all are today to that point. So that is our special panel discussion for November 6th. It will be live streamed, and then also will be a Genderful episode later. And then on Monday, November 13th, our Genderful guest will be Rafi Marhaba, they them pronouns, and we are discussing art, activism, and spirituality. I believe Rafi may also be, I think Rafi is going to have some potentially helpful things to share about some current events that we've been experiencing.
Yes.
Also, I'm looking forward to that conversation. Anyways, Genderful would like to thank all of our supporters on Patreon, including our newest supporter, Miranda Katita. Miranda, do the mischief.
I don't know. I'm investing into our own show. So
I mean,
so I'm actually going to be one of the panelists in next week's pod because I work for the government of Canada. So and I've recently returned to work after being off on disability leave for a couple years. So I have all this new disposable income. So I like to pay it forward and spread the love and pay back to all the people that have made my life better. So
well, we're very grateful for your support. I'm now going to read the rest of our list of wonderful supporters. Holly Blash, Winter Vespers, Loch-Ness Gamer, Justin Baker Rojas, Sandra Mickelborg, Yaceo, Ray of Swords, Sherry Keller, Mirami, the Hessian, and Trans Capybara. Thank you, everyone, for being here and enjoying this show. I know editing is a bit different than usual, but we have enjoyed having you here, and we'll see you next time.
Bye.
Genderful would like to thank our guest for being on this podcast. If you'd like to catch us live, join us on Mondays on twitch.tv/GenderMeowster. Show notes will appear in the edited versions of the show on Fridays on both YouTube and podcasting platforms.
If you have a question you'd like the host to answer or are gender diverse and would like to request an interview, please send an email to genderfulpodcast@gmail.com or sign up via the website at genderfulpodcast.com.
As a gender diverse community, the Clouder wants to assure our listeners that we are prepared to moderate our spaces. We will get positive and negative feedback on these shows and topics, and we have a moderation team on our channels, socials, and Discord server ready to deal with this.
Please join our Discord server at discord.gg/Meowster to meet the community and get a regular digest of solidarity resources. You can also support us with subscriptions on Patreon, following and reviewing us on your favorite podcasting platform, or engaging with our posts and content on social media at GenderfulPod and at GenderMeowster.
You can take a few minutes to rate the show. We will post any 5-star reviews on our socials, so get creative. Mention a special interest of your own, a project you're working on, or even say hi to your comfort person in your review. What power!
This show is made possible by volunteers, tips, and subscriptions. Shout out to the folks helping us coordinate guests, edit the podcast, moderate the live chat, and post on our socials.
Here's our artist credit. Genderful is hosted by Miranda Katita and GenderMeowster. Genderful's pre-show is wrangled by JuiceTex. Genderful's live stream is produced by Mirami. Genderful is edited and mixed by Transgriffin and FreeRangeMegs. Genderful's promos and thumbnail graphic are designed by Transgriffin. Genderful's social media is managed by Kainsey. Genderful's theme song is called Hope by FreeRangeMegs, also known as Soma. The current GenderMeowster logo was designed by Siptopia. Genderful is the intellectual property of GenderMeowster. All rights reserved. Trans rights are human rights. That's right.